Hi everyone, my name is Bryan Intihar, Creative Director at Insomniac Games, and this is the intro to Marvel Spider-Man. So with this opening scene, we had this big goal of not only just showing, a bunch of different Easter eggs and a lot of things that when you see it on second or third glance, you're going to pick up, but we also had to educate players on who is this Peter Parker, who is this Spider-Man. This wasn't a 15-year-old Peter Parker. It's actually someone who's been Spider-Man for 8 years. So we had to figure out how do we quickly get people up to speed on what he's been up to. So our lead writer, John Paquette, and our animation director, Bobby Coddington, had this great idea of looking at actually the opening of Back to the Future, where Marty enters the Doc's lab, and he had this really cool pan from left to right where you learn so much about what's going to happen in that movie, and we thought, wouldn't that be a great reference? So as you can see here, we're panning across Peter's apartment and learning about his tech, some of the villains he's taken down, and actually when we recorded this, performed it, we actually even had Yuri Lowenthal, the actor of Spider-Man, lay on the bed like Marty does with this really awkward pose. It just never actually made its way in the final game. And of course, as we go here, now it's go time for Pete, as he realizes now Fisk, his biggest adversary in this 8 years of being Spider-Man, is now possibly exiting the city. So, and here what we really want to do is, again, this is not just, Tony Stark or Captain America. This is Peter Parker, one of the most relatable superheroes you can imagine. So yeah, he's trying to get dressed while cooking his food, eating some breakfast. And this was actually a really key point here, not only just showing off how he uses tech, but as you see, boom, he's got to pay his bills. And we always said the best stories are when Peter's world and Spider-Man's world collide. And we wanted to show that even in the opening scene. So you see here, Peter's making a choice. Does he follow up on his bills, or does he deal with Fisk? And as good Spider-Man does, he's going after the big guy. And then from there, we really want to make sure that we had a seamless transition right into gameplay and put you doing what you expect from a Spider-Man game, and that's swinging through the city. Okay, so after a long travel up to Fisk Tower, we finally make it to the final fight. It's a fight 8 years in the making, where Spider-Man is taking out Wilson Fisk.
Writing your memoirs? Don't forget the hyphen between Spider and Man.
And if you see this, we get a little humor from Spider-Man, and he brings up the hyphen joke. And this is actually a little bit of a nod to one of a Spider-Man writer by the name of Dan Slott. Dan is someone we consulted early on the project to make sure that we were hitting the right tone in the field for Spider-Man. And it's something, a joke that he always mentions about the hyphen on Twitter. So we thought, hey, why not throw a little joke in there for Dan? And it seemed like it worked pretty well. Of course, since they've been fighting for the last 8 years, Fisk is usually is kind of getting ready for an attack from Spider-Man. So as you can imagine, 2 turrets aren't enough. We're going to have 4. And I actually even think in one of the earlier versions of the game, we actually had like up to 6 turrets. So which proved to be a little bit too much for people. So players during usability kind of said, we lost a little visibility, and so maybe we just need to do 4 turrets. And of course, Fisk, because he wants to see Spider-Man go down, he watches, but then Spider-Man comes in and says, nope, enough is enough. And the big bald guy gets a little bit angry and decides, why not throw a desk at Spider-Man? And actually, this ended up being a tutorial for how to throw objects from midair. So kind of ended up being a really cool event, not only to transition back into gameplay, but to teach the player a mechanic. So we wanted these boss fights to really feel larger than life, really play up the spectacle of each fight. So one thing we started doing is adding a lot of interstitial moments that help transport the player and even the villain to different areas. So this is actually a cinematic that one of our animators, Danny Garnett, created that really helped sell the idea that not only is Fisk powerful, but he really wants to destroy Spider-Man. And it was a great transition to this final space, where this is kind of acting as our final test, and not just against Fisk, but kind of all the lessons we've learned in combat throughout the beginning of the game, from the opening swing all the way through Fisk Tower and now here. So whether you're learning to punch, dodge, throw items back, use your webs, it was a great test. And what's really interesting is that as all opening missions happen, they go through a bunch of different iterations. And at one point, we couldn't really figure out how to end the fight. And you'll see on one of the walls on the other side is that there's an elevator, a glass elevator. And at one point we tried out actually putting Fisk. He was going to run away during the fight and let his bad guys deal with Spider-Man, and he was actually going to be trapped inside the elevator, and you actually had to use your webs to pull the elevator out before he made it up to the helipad at the top. But it just didn't quite work that well. So what we ended up doing was making sure that we play up again, not only the brutal strength of Fisk, but also his anger. So we thought this would be a great way to see these two, adversaries finally come to an end. So you see Fisk using his power to cause him to go through the glass, and then we see a bunch of crazy, cool acrobatics that, of course, our animators and our designers and gameplay team put together to really sell this final crescendo moment. And I think, again, it shows just how well players do feel like Spider-Man. And of course, even though he does want to take Fisk down, he'll never let him die. So he does a nice little classic web. And of course, by the end, gives him one last bit of humor before he's taken off by the cops.
So, should we kiss now? Yeah, maybe later.
Probably one of my favorite activities in open world were the backpacks, because not only did it really help us, give us incentives to kind of explore a city, but it actually served as a great way to kind of get people up to speed on what's happened to Peter over the last 8 years. So what's really cool is that for every item you pick up, Spider-Man actually talks about it, and you get a little more of a insight into what's happened over the last 8 years of him being Spider-Man.
The menu from my first real date with MJ. Wish I could have afforded someplace fancier. But she didn't seem to mind. Good old Empire State. Man, I love this town. Time to grab a snapshot.
So even though Peter's a scientist in our game, we didn't want to forget about his photography background. So we came up with the idea of landmarks that players could swing around the city and take pictures of not only great New York sites, but also several Marvel ones, such as Avengers Tower, the Wakanda Embassy, even the Sanctum Sanctorum. And if you do search around the city enough, you'll actually find secret photos that you can take. So hopefully that as you explore the city, you'll look for things that might be a nice little secret.